to markets. It's all about...
Put it in a headline.
T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live!
Welcome to the Hunters Campfire Podcast. Pull up a chair and join Hurls, Jono and Mark as we share stories from the hunt, insights from the field, and a few laughs along the way. Whether you're chasing game or just love the outdoors, this is your place by the fire. Good evening and welcome to episode 3 of Peers for Politics. Tonight, we're joined by Rob Borsak Jnr. Ian is not here. He's been out with no power for 5 hours up on the range. And Jono is stuck in traffic to do with the storm that's currently raging across Brisbane. So it's going to be an intimate discussion between the two smartest people in the room.
Yeah, by default.
That's you and me. So for those, as we know, we've spoken to Robbie Catter from CAP and Graham Park from who's both the state and federal president of the Shooters Union, to cover off in Queensland. And so we've decided to cross the border into New South Wales as part of our big lap of finding out what's happening at each state and territory around gun laws and what we can do about it. And I suppose the reality, that border has never been more relevant is what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's I know we like to call you Mexicans and you can't play rugby league, but it's a serious border at the moment. It's a step change. So I think for those listening and watching, let's get an understanding of what's actually happening on the ground right now with gun laws in New South Wales.
Yes. So anyone listening, I'm Rob Borsak Jnr. I'm the State Director of the Shooters, Fishers, Farmers Party in New South Wales. The Mexican joke's a good one because we thought you guys were cowboys and now we're off doing our own thing down here and no one's following us. So it's kind of awkward. Okay, what's the state of things? Well, I can start by saying, obviously, there's no use because I think every interview in a row that I've seen you guys doing, everyone goes over Bondi again. So we can save all the listeners all that headache straight away, I guess. But I can tell you they went back to Parliament last week in New South Wales and the way they listed all the business was just like Bondi never happened. They've all just kicked off, like for us, it's, one of the worst things that's ever happened to us as a community, as an industry, as a lifestyle, as a recreation, as all of the above, as a culture. But to the normies, I guess you'd say, they're just acting like, oh yeah, that was just a blip. They did something and now they're moving on to the next political thing they can do. So, what does that speak to? Maybe a level of psychopath that we haven't experienced or we haven't seen until we've been directly affected like we have now. Because I was taken aback by it, that there was nothing said. Bondi was just another piece of business that happened. And at the time they acted like it was the biggest thing in the world, and to all of us it still is, but to them, yeah, it's just nothing. So yeah, that's I guess my strange little introduction to where it is right now. But do you want to get into the state of the bills and legislation and everything like that and what comes next? Because that's what I've kind of been going around talking to clubs and about. So you want to jump into that?
Sounds like a fantastic idea. It's odd too. I mean, and the trouble with, well, not the trouble, but what we have to avoid on podcasts is actually kind of delving into the stupidity of it all. Because that's easy. That's the easy way to go. There are so many stupid things to talk about. And it's pretty hard to not see what's happening in Sydney at the moment with that particular riot that went on. And
I know,
kind of think,
it's madness.
Where's all the dangerous gun owners now? It's just,
Oh.
So I don't want to get into that because, as I said, that's the easy thing to get in. But understanding what you've been talking to clubs and I suppose what legislatively has changed and what that means for people. Even here, us in Queensland and around country, I think it's really important that we know what each of us are suffering through. Yeah. I think that's really important. We can't kind of go, oh, well, that's over there or this is me. I think we've got to realize, we're a single organism here, and where it affects one of us, it's going to affect all of us.
Definitely. And look, as I already said, they were hoping that the first domino would be us, and then everyone else would follow, and it just didn't work out that way. And the reason for that is something that they're learning now, There's a couple of news stories I can highlight on it that have just come out this afternoon here in Sydney, being Thursday the 12th, today, just for people later on. But the government doesn't know what they've done in New South Wales. They rushed it so quickly. They did it with zero external consultation. They only consulted police. That was it. And they took the OA laws and they said, let's do that, but let's make it tighter. So how can we make it tighter? Instead of 5 guns, we'll make it 4. And then, I will put our own little flavor in it on the recategorizations, with straight pulls and button press and lever release and all that sort of stuff. So how can we do that? Police, what do you think? Well, you should get rid of lever, button, blah-de-blah, blah-de-blah, and belt-fed shotguns. Okay, great, we'll put that in. And that's how you get stupidity like that put in there. And again, I can tell you from the horse's mouth that they believe belt-fed shotguns exist. That's why they're in there. They believe there are current, legal, commercially available belt-fed shotguns. That's why they put them in the legislation. So as we know, they could have put the tooth fairy in there, for all of its relevancy. And just on that point, another scary part in that, when there were discussions with the registry, asking them why asking for clarification on the recategorizations or the firearms they were mentioning, the way it was written in the briefing that they circulated was that it was I can't remember the language exactly. So this is not verbatim, but it was firearms that operate with the actions of, and they talked about button press, straight pull bolts that don't go up and down, and then they just had lever. So we went back and clarified. So do you mean lever release or do you mean lever action? And I can tell you in that conversation, there was a bit of umming and ahhing and feverish typing and writing from staffers. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that without that question, we could have been this close to losing lever actions in New South Wales. So again, none of those firearms are semi-automatics, and yet they're now banned. So we have the tightest gun laws in the world without semi-automatics, and we still have those crimes anyway. So they don't know what they've done. The people at the top don't know the difference between an air rifle and an elephant gun. I just gave the example. They don't know the difference between a lever action and a lever release. And that's because they only asked the police, and the police they asked were the ballistics experts in the police, in inverted commas. So they're not seeming to have any expertise. And that's not bashing police. That's just highlighting that no one's more expert than the people who do it themselves. Yeah. So where do you want to go next? What happens? What happens now? Well, we all know that they sat on the 23rd and the 24th of December. Legislation sailed through with only one amendment, and that was and this is something that they didn't even put in the legislation in the first place, which is ridiculous, that no one in New South Wales that's on an ASIO watch list can obtain a firearms license. So that had to be amended in. When the first piece of news after, father and son shoot up Bondi was son was on ASIO watch list, and they didn't even put it in the legislation. So that's ridiculous for me. So it took someone else in Parliament to point that out to them to do it. So how did the votes go on that? Well, interestingly enough, what we saw in New South Wales was what sent ripples to Canberra, which was that the Liberal Party and Labor Party completely teamed up. They didn't go for any amendments except that one that I said. And there were over 150 amendments to the bill, and they all acted like it was just another day for them in Parliament. They were all crowing about they don't want to be here too long because it's Christmas Eve, and I don't want to sit through Christmas and blah, blah, blah. Could you imagine in your job, whatever job you do out there, if your boss said, you got to stay back and finish the work because you haven't finished it. And you said, oh, but boss, I have to get home and I didn't sign up for this. Can you imagine using that kind of language in your everyday job? And politicians are complaining that they're working too hard. Give me a break. Anyway, so it all went through. The Greens, so Liberal and Labor voted for it. The Nationals pretended they were against it by voting for it. They were able to have some sort of, and this is the New South Wales Nationals, mind you. So they were able to pretend that they were against it, and they were kicking up and down and saying, oh, this is terrible for landowners and this is that and this is that. But their strength in New South Wales as a coalition, within the coalition, is much stronger than Canberra. And in Canberra, they broke up their coalition over this stuff. But in New South Wales, they all have shadow ministries. They're all got cushy jobs. They're all sitting on whatever, getting nice big pay packets. And they had a joint party room and they spoke about it and they knew what they were doing. So the politics of it was amazing in that they managed to pretend they were against it, but they didn't say a bad word against their colleagues in the Liberals. So if the Nationals had truly grown a spine, like I'm no fan of Little Proud, but like Little Proud did in Canberra, they could have stopped this. They could have stopped this, that's for sure. The Greens didn't know what to do because it was bundled together. In New South Wales, it was one bill. In Canberra, they split them. So it was one bill and the Greens didn't know what to do because the Greens wanted the firearm stuff as strict as possible. And they put up amendments for even stricter firearm stuff. But they didn't like the anti-protest stuff for obvious reasons with the stuff we're seeing on the streets. So they ended up abstaining. So just an interesting point there. The Greens that you hear now in New South Wales saying we live in a police state and blah, blah, blah. Well, those Greens themselves had a chance to stand up and vote one way or the other, and they chose not to vote at all. So they need to keep their mouths shut and they cannot complain because the people that put them there wanted them to do something about it and they chose to do nothing. So the politics of it, crazy. So it all passed through. So it passed through the lower house and the upper house. Obviously, you saw Mark Bonasiak and Rob Borsak Sr. standing up there and telling people to pull their socks up, straighten out and get on with it, which was, that's what their job is. And we take this sort of thing very, very seriously. And we were obviously having a big team in Parliament. There were people in the lower house with their team. In the upper house, we had our team. We had about 20 odd people in their office up there on level 11. And they were all, 2 really long nights over that. And the team acted very, very well. They were seamless. So, my team that is listening to this, Team SFF, they performed really, really well. I'm very happy. I'm very impressed. I'm very proud of the way that they conducted themselves and the way they acted during that. And basically, this is not a loss. This is the interesting part. At least I don't see this as a loss. And I say that because the government doesn't know what they've done. And a lot of these laws, they have been legislated, they have passed the House, but they haven't ascended or they haven't been proclaimed, as we say in New South Wales. So the laws aren't in effect. So yes, now moving forward, you can't have more than 4 firearms if you have hunting as a genuine reason or recreation environment as a genuine reason. But they're not taking guns off people now. That's because they need to sort out how the bloody hell they're going to do it. So they do that with the regulations here in New South Wales. So our firearms regulations were already due for a review and an updating this year. And last year we saw some draft regulations because, bureaucracies and political parties leak like sieves. So we saw what they wanted and what they were putting on the table. And back then, the regulations that they wanted to update were on the back of an absolute slew of firearms thefts in New South Wales. Yeah, so basically, we have the laws, but we don't have the regulation. The regulation is how they're actually going to enact those laws, how they're going to make them work functionally. Because at the moment, they have no function to them because they're so wide-ranging. They can't just enact them immediately. So the draft regulations that they already had last year, that they were proposing this year, were on the back of a lot of firearms thefts. So as we know, data from the registry is not secure in New South Wales because when they come and inspect you, we have a number of anecdotal cases here where people have an inspection, a large collection or a large DLL or something like that, usually in the regions, and then they get robbed almost immediately after. So does that, the evidence or does that run sheet with all their names, serial numbers, everything just go missing? Or, does it evaporate? No, the data's not secure. So the data goes walkabout, right? We have no paper trail because there literally isn't one. The data isn't signed in and signed out. It's simply copied and pasted off a software system. I know because it was very similar in corrections, for example. In corrections, when you go and do a home visit, you can't take a data pad with you or something like that. So you're not carrying that around. So you have to get the data onto a physical piece of paper that you can walk around with and do stuff with. But you don't sign that data in and out. So it's likewise. So when it's on the computer, it's safe. But when it's on a piece of paper, it's completely unsafe, completely untracked. Now, what's riskier than firearms data if what the people in public say about firearms being the most dangerous thing? So again, we're trusting our police to keep us safe, and they're not keeping us safe by getting that information out. Now, that's not bashing police at all. Like I said, I worked in corrections. I worked with police all the time. I'm obviously very, very anti-crime, hence working in corrections for almost 10 years. But I can tell you, people get in the way of those systems. Good security is only as good as the people implementing it. So if you don't have those checks and balances, that's what happens. So in those draft regulations, to fix their problems with data, they wanted to put massive, massive safe storage requirements on firearms owners. We're talking back to base alarms on everything. We're talking guns tethered into a safe. We're talking trigger locks on everything. We're talking when you're traveling, you basically need to have a mobile safe inside your car. Guns need to be tethered to the chassis of the vehicle individually. That sort of craziness, because they were having these robberies. They were even talking about not having anything on your vehicle that identifies you have anything to do with firearms or guns. So having a hunting club sticker, having a Kuyu, having a Burris sticker on your car. No, they're hunting breeds. You're not allowed to they're illegal. That's madness. All because they don't know how to safely store their data. That's obvious, as clear as day. So with that backdrop, now they have Bondi, and the government asked them for their input to write the legislation. They asked nobody else. And mind you, the democratic process works. It's very, very simple. At one end, you have the citizens who vote for candidates with policies, and those candidates become politicians who have legislation. And then that legislation becomes law, and then the enforcement of the law is done by the police. That's the straight line of democracy. That's the way it's meant to work. But here, politicians, instead of using their policies from the citizens, they simply go to the police, and then the police go back to the politicians with their policies, and that becomes law. So we have what you call the self-licking ice cream, which just keeps going around and around and around. It's true. It's true. It's true. So after they had those last lot of firearms regulations, this time they said, all right, police, you helped us write these laws. How can we regulate these laws now? So the police that don't even know what some firearms are and that some firearms don't exist, they're going to tell us how to write the regulations now. So that's due this year. And we still don't know what that's going to look like. Are they going to drop the hammer on everything and punish us for their mistakes, just like they were already proposing to do around safe storage? Or are they going to do what they're supposed to do and have some clarity now, like people in Queensland, like your Premier has signalled in Queensland, that after he's thought about it, he's going to put things in that can cut down on terrorism, have terrorist laws enacted? Or are they just going to punish firearms owners? So we don't know in New South Wales, but the way the trend's going, they're probably just going to double down. They put in those anti-protest laws, for example, and they just keep extending the 14 days. No one can protest because that law's in place. It's perfectly fine. So police are just going to do it. So they have such big scope now. And these series of legislations, because the federal laws are also interesting because those federal offences are prosecuted and sentenced in New South Wales. There is no federal court for those. So they have two lots of legislation here in New South Wales to work with. And they're both so broad and so wide-reaching that until these regulations carve out the things that are not going to be touched, we have to assume everything is on the table, that they can go after everything and anything that they want. They don't even know what the buyback's going to look like. They put up $1 billion, and we know that nationwide it could be $10 to $15 billion. Where are they going to get this money from? Down here in New South Wales, you might know, you might not know, but they just had a huge Barney Parliament because the government can't afford workers' compensation anymore. So they had a huge mess on their plate about that, saying, well, either workers' comp goes entirely because we can't afford it, there's no money for it, or we make these cuts, we make these changes, and workers' comp survives. So that was 5 minutes ago. And then 5 minutes later, the Premier says he's giving a blank check to the police there is a blank check to regulate firearms owners and for the buyback. So where's all this money going to come from? Where's it all going to come from? So look, that's just a couple of examples of how they just don't know what they're doing here. They don't know what they've done, and they actually don't know how they're going to go about it. Now, I guess you can say light at the end of the tunnel here is that they do want to talk to us. They want our input. So I can tell you that the government wants to talk to the firearms industry. They want to talk to the firearms politicians like our guys, for example. And that's because, as I said, they don't know what they're doing. Okay. is that because they haven't spoken to the right people in the first place, or is that because they just want diverse voices, or is it so they can just say that they have consulted? Who knows? But back in 96, when the Carr government was implementing the National Firearms Agreement and putting his own legislation in New South Wales, he approached John Tingle, and John Tingle gave him a lot of input. And a lot of the way the New South Wales legislation was written was because John Tingle helped him, for example. Like the reason we have genuine reasons is because that was one of John Tingle's suggestions, for example, as well as a lot of the safe storage stuff. That was his suggestions. So hopefully they're going to talk to us, but there's a whole lot of question marks that are just still there. So what I've been doing, going around clubs and talking to them, is just answering those questions, because there's a hell of a lot of nervous people out there. And it's right that they should be nervous, but it is good that people are getting together and they are meeting now, because it's February. Clubs are getting back together. People are starting to see each other again. And we've all been suffering in our own individual worlds. We've all been away from each other, looking at our phones, looking at the TV, and talking to a few friends here and there. But once we get together in our clubs again and we can share the same room, share the same conversation, it's been already feeling like a much more supportive environment, even though it is a very stressful time. Does that make sense?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So, just to give it some context in that space, like I went away in the first week of December, and it was like the new hunting bill's really, really close.
Yeah. Yes.
It's really close. Looks like we're going to get it. They're arguing about the idea of a right to hunt, and they're arguing over a few things, but we're really, really close. And then, 15th December, world changes.
Yeah.
Spoke to Robert, Senior.
Yeah.
Well, I was in, Ian was in Toowoomba, Jono was in Brisbane, I was in Somerset in England. We spoke to him and we spoke to Tom.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's just been a seismic shift. And to be honest, like as a Queenslander, I'm not all that, I'm really, really happy about what's happened, but I'm not like Yahoo, one is because I think, one, this is a national issue, but two, it just shows that even when you win, you're at the whim of,
Yes.
a political process. It could have just as easily gone the other way here. There's no,
Yeah.
you're at the whim. And this is something that I've been talking about and thinking about a lot about, how do we get away from, or how do we become more effective at fighting the whims of political
Yeah.
parties that do this to us, Because at the
Yeah.
moment we're at their, at their leisure type thing.
Yeah. Look, and that's the scary thing. Like it was similar during COVID. If you cast your mind back now, gosh, that was 6 years ago around this time, March or something, wasn't it? March, April. And
Yeah, well,
yeah, I think it
in
was
January and went through the year.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but back then, everyone was worried, everyone was on their own. And then, challengers went to the High Court saying they can't tell us to stay at home. We have the right to move around our own country. We're citizens of this country. And then we all found out we don't even have the right to leave our homes if they tell us not to. So that is that is effectively the level of freedom that we're living under in this country. And it's scary, and it was a blip in our minds. But then, we were so glued to the news at that time that when Bondi rolled around, we all started to turn on that part of our brain that could recognize what politicians were saying, what they weren't saying as well. And then reading between the lines. Yeah, basically now, like I know there's a big legal fund with McDonald Law, and obviously he's an absolute hero for putting his hand up and doing that and wanting to be, the person at the front of the charge. That's fantastic. And there are smaller things going on, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if people want something to get behind a cause, then I'm all for it. But right now, the way things are, the way that they've done these laws in New South Wales, they're legal. It's constitutional. That's why they were able to pass it, because when they want to write a law here in New South Wales, and sometimes they make mistakes, like they did it with the protesting at the Opera House thing, where there was a legal challenge and it was found it was unconstitutional, and they had to let those loonies keep protesting at the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House and things like that. firearms, firearms are a privilege for us. As you said, we're at the whim of these people. And if they want to take those things away from you, it's, they're allowed to, which is scary, which is, I guess we've always operated on the pretext in this country that our government trusts us, that they think that we're good people, generally speaking, and that they always think the best of us. And we just keep finding out that they don't. And the people who are the most trustworthy in society, everyone that owns a firearms license in this country is, I can't hang out at the pub. I can't just get into a brawl with someone at the pub and then, go home like my grandfather could, or my great-grandfather could, or any of those Anzac boys could when they knocked off at, 4 o'clock. Because if that happens now, my favorite thing to do is gone forever. I'll never get it back. And now in New South Wales, I can't apply for a firearms license down the track. And if it gets declined, I have no right of appeal because our NCAT process is now gone. So we have absolutely zero freedom, absolutely zero leeway because our government doesn't think that we're inherently good people anymore. Our high trust society is gone. Our faith in politics is also gone. And it's always on the back of something that we're doing something to crack down on something else. We saw this all before after it happened in the US, and everyone in Australia lost their privacy. No one ever has a private email ever again. We had, when Dutton became Home Affairs Minister federally, he said there's no more private chats. So the government has to have a backdoor to every single encrypted chat if they want to. So we already have no privacy. You don't even have the right to a private conversation in this country. That's what I'm saying. So I'm just kind of illustrating how bad we have it here. And people don't realize that because the government doesn't think we're inherently good. And that's for me, that's an unchristian way to look at the world. That's an unchristian way to operate. And say what you like, but we're a Christian country. We were founded on those values and forgiveness and the good old fashioned Aussie fair go. They're all things that are just every day, more and more, they're just gone. They're just gone. Yeah, that's pretty depressing when you think about it. What do they say? That's a bit of a black pill look at it. But yeah, look, something I would say is now the media is coming out of the woodwork, and now the media is starting to do stories on post Bondi on what comes next because they're looking at the firearms world. And there was a story that came out on Channel 7 just today, and because of their lack of consultation, the government didn't even think, even the police didn't think, because that's who they consulted with. They didn't realize that as soon as you put a gun limit on that one firearms owner in the household, he can only have 4, but the guy owns 12 firearms. He's going to get the rest of the adults in the household to get a firearms license so he can keep them, right? And that's what's happened. And now there's shocking, in inverted commas, shocking figures coming out of New South Wales where the registry is swamped with applications because there's been a 7,000% increase in this and a 1,400% increase in this. And it's like, yeah, because you didn't consult. And it's perfectly lawful, perfectly reasonable for those people to apply for firearms licenses. If they pass the test, if they pass the rigor, if they're fit and proper people, then they should be able to get their firearms license. And if you don't like it, well, you should have thought about that before you put these silly laws in place without consultation, because that's automatically what's happened. But then on the other side of the coin, the businesses like gun shops and things, a lot of people are very, very scared. So they're not going to their gun shops. So the gun shops are now, a lot of them are on their knees. And similarly, what's going to happen there is they're not going to have less firearms shops in New South Wales. They're going to have more firearms owners, which was shocking figures that they talked about how many licenses and how many guns, blah, blah, blah. They're just going to have the smaller operators go, and they're going to have big operators show up. And that's basically how the market's going to shift. And because they put caps on, well, you know what? Now I do want, my total cap. And if someone else in my household gets a license, I want them to have the total cap. So the firearms numbers are going to go up. But right now we're in the ebb where everyone's scared and everyone's got question marks. And because someone in the bureaucracy somewhere made a mistake or made a multitude of mistakes by not talking for whatever reason, could be good old fashioned human incompetence that this guy got through and the checks weren't done or the intel wasn't there or something like that. Because they have the infrastructure. Their infrastructure is world class, their intel infrastructure. So there's no reason why they shouldn't have found out other than human incompetence. Because of that, no one has lost their job that we know of. It was the same minister who this guy got the license under, who is the current police minister. She's still got a job. The last commissioner hasn't been investigated or hauled over the coals. And if he has, why aren't they telling us? The people deserve to know, because that's a public servant. We should know. We shouldn't be closing ranks about those things. We need to know who's accountable for this. We need to know who's at least going to lose their job, because what this has done now is someone else who's done nothing wrong, firearms businesses, firearms operators, the firearms industry, the hunting industry, all of that peripheral stuff that's suffering as well. Now they're going to lose their livelihoods. So they're being punished for someone else's mistakes. So how the hell did we get here? That's the system that they've set up. And I can tell you firsthand, they don't care. They don't care. We've had firearms owners. There's a firearm shop called Safari Firearms. That's my local shop. He supports my hunting club. It's a family business. I've been hunting with the family many times. And he lives in Chris Minns' electorate. His gun shop's in the electorate. He went into the office multiple times to try and talk to them. And the way he was talked to by the people in, he'll probably not like me saying this because Gary is a very nice, polite person, and he has a very honest family and a very honest way that he goes about things. But both times he went into Chris Minns' office quietly, calmly, politely, asking questions, the way he was spoken to by the staff in that office. We believe the first time Minns was there, but just didn't want to see him. So he got the old classic fob off. But the first time they were laughing about, oh, we thought no one even goes into your gun shop. It's like, what do you mean? Oh, we always wondered if you guys do any business in there, because they have to have blackout windows, because they have to. So that's how little they knew already. And then the next time he went in there, when he said he was from Safari Firearms, the staff had taken a step back saying, oh, geez, like, is this guy strapped or something? That's just how little and ignorant and rude they are. If you did that about anybody else from any other group in society, forget what it was, you'd be called every name under the sun for acting like that. But treating us that way is just fine. It's just fine. Like, how is, yeah, again, I'm just illustrating how we in this situation, but it's all coming to a head now. And again, even the normies, the normal people who aren't in the firearms world, they saw that this was not our fault. They saw we should not be getting punished. Even the devil himself, Darth Vader, Johnny Howard, said it too. He's the one who said firearms are a distraction. They need to tackle the real issues. And I'm yet to see, other than that one amendment, which wasn't in the original legislation, anything there that could have prevented Bondi. Whereas at least the Queensland guys going after it, which is positive to see. So I realize I'm talking myself into a corner here.
No, mate. I think, people want to hear this stuff. So
yeah,
by all means, keep talking. I mean, for me, I was having a conversation with Graham and a few others, is that the way I'm kind of looking at it is, and the way I'm starting to frame it is that 96 was the end of the casual gun owner.
Yeah.
That's what 96 did. It got rid of the casual gun owners. If you stuck around post 96, you wanted to own a firearm.
Yep.
You jumped through that. And I think what that created was, a new generation of firearm owners who were actually what I like to, they're enthusiasts. They wanted to be in it. And we've seen the growth of that enthusiasm, in all sorts of ways. But I think we've got to a stage now where we need like if that was like Gen 1 to Gen 2, we need an upgrade. We need 2.1 where you become a voting enthusiast.
Yeah.
You start to vote about this. You kind of go, you know what? This is important to me. I'm going to vote. And the old team colours doesn't matter anymore. Throw them out.
Yep.
If they give you what you want, vote for them. If they don't, vote against them. I think that's our only option here. And I think that needs to be, if there's one national or nationwide approach we can take, I think it's that. If you're going to treat me like that, then I'm going to vote against you. And I mean, that's what we're seeing here is Queensland is that the Labor Party up here are running this campaign, and some genius has come up with a slogan that's something along the lines of, you can't be tough on crime if you're soft on guns. And the amount of blowback they're getting from that is
Yeah.
significant. Because people just going, so that's what you're saying. So you're saying because I own a firearms, I'm a criminal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole buyback situation is that we know there's no guns on the streets. It's guns out of safes. That's what the buyback is. It's guns out of safes. So
Look,
that's right.
Yeah. So just getting back to that self-licking ice cream analogy that I made is
I like
because
that.
because they allow the police to influence the legislation, the police need to do what's in their best interest. Again, this is not bashing police. This is just what makes sense logically from a business perspective for them. An easy society to police it. So they're all run by statistics. That's what they're run by. And all the statistics say that if there's more guns on the street, legal or illegal, and they say if there's a chance that legal firearms become illegal firearms, then that's a firearm that puts police at risk. So the police unions, those groups, they have a lot of strength. They have a lot of influence there because they can talk directly to government and they can influence legislation. So if they're saying a better system for us, a safer system for us, whatever justification they want to use for changing legislation, and the government lets them, then they're going to use it. Less guns on the street makes it easier to police us. So in an ideal world for them, we have no guns. Freedom doesn't matter. No one protests. No one speeds. No one does any of that stuff. But they're choosing for us now that they're going to crack down on guns because that makes police themselves physically safer. Just to highlight something on that, we all saw the stories during Bondi, and we saw the video of that police officer who managed to shoot both of them. That guy's a target pistol shooter. So that guy is one of the rare police who is a fit and proper person to hold a firearms license. So he was the one who had the wherewithal and the skill, the technical skill to carry that firearm into danger and at a greater length than he would probably practice at, was able to take those shots. One was a kill shot, one was a disabling shot. That's amazing. And that's a testament to his discipline as a firearms owner, as a civilian, not as a police officer. His requirements to operate that firearm under the police are almost nothing. I would compare it to being armor guard. You show up for your shift, you sign out your firearm, you complete your shift, you might need to use it, or maybe not, and then you sign it back in again. And then you're just a civilian like everybody else. And the reason why the police, I believe, don't carry guns like they do in the United States or things like that are because a lot of those police are not firearms enthusiasts. They're not safe. They're not capable. They're not able to operate and handle a firearm like every other citizen was. But the hero of Bondi who shot those two, who stopped that shooting, the man who stopped those shooting was a fit and proper person, firearms license owner who took him down. It wasn't a normal police officer, which is the interesting thing. So the cops didn't save the day. A firearms owner saved the day. And people don't know that. Why hasn't that guy got a medal? The woman who shot the guy stabbing in the Bondi Westfield just 12 months before that, she was all over the news. She was the hero of it all. But not that police officer. Why not? That was much worse. Probably because they knew he owned a firearms license and he was a pistol shooter. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. But it's an interesting question.
Certainly, it provides another part of the story.
Yeah.
We know what's wrong. That's no doubt. And we know there's potential for more to come. As you said, unfortunately, there is a potential. So where to from here?
Where to from here? I can tell you that we have an election coming up in 2027 in New South Wales. And we thought that Minns wasn't going to be this rash because he has an election coming up and he doesn't have a true majority in the lower house already. But the Labor Party, just like Albanese, Minns is pure politics. He's got a master's degree in political science from Princeton University, and everything he does is about politics. So nothing is about everyday. Nothing is about, how do I want people to be? It's just politics. So he knew that going after firearms wasn't going to be a net negative for him. So he went after it. It probably would have been just all business for him, all business. That's how they are. And with that election coming up, it's one of my jobs when elections roll around is to run our state elections as the state director here. And I can tell you we're going to have our biggest election ever. There's 93 seats in New South Wales and we're going to run them at least 50. In the past, we would stick to the coast and stick to the regions. And now we're going to start coming into Sydney and we're going to be the point of difference in all of those marginal seats, just to stick it up on. We might not win those seats, but we're going to be the important people to speak to win over, because there's another bit of stupidity that they published in the papers leading up to Bondi saying, here's where all the firearms are and here's where all the license holders are. And they published them by postcode. Now, there's privacy laws in New South Wales, so they couldn't do that stupid map like they did in WA, but they could tell the postcode, they could tell the firearms number and the licenses number. So now we know exactly where all the seats are with the most firearms owners, and we're going to run in those seats definitely, as well as all the margin seats. And as Mark Manaziak said in the House, we don't care what colour you are politically, we're running against you in those seats because you all did this to us, and the ones that even voted against it, like the Nationals, they didn't do everything that they could, even though they were pretending that they were. So if they want to play politics, let's play politics. Let's see what the voters decide. Let's see which way the voters go, and let's get that crossbench back in New South Wales, because previously we had in New South Wales on the crossbench after the last election, we had basically on the centre right of the crossbench in the upper house I'm talking about, because the upper house has a lot of sway here in New South Wales, and that only gets elected. Half of it gets elected every 4 years, just like in Canberra. So on that crossbench after 2023, we had 3 from One Nation. We had the 2 from the Shooters, Fishers, Farmers, and then we had the Libertarians, who go both ways. So they're kind of half a conservative, because their ideology sends them all over the place. And then you have 4 Greens, and then you have an Animal Justice Party. So they have 5, and sometimes they get a Libertarian every now and then. So once One Nation imploded here in New South Wales, and they have no infrastructure now, that crossbench went back to 2, because all those 3 One Nations went independent. Who knows what their career aspects are, but once someone becomes an independent in the upper house, they're irrelevant. So they just go with whatever they're doing. They're getting extra money here by doing these extra jobs, being the chair of this committee, or the deputy president of the house, or they're doing whatever they're doing. But they're no longer there with their party. They're no longer there effectively. They don't need to answer to their voters anymore, because it's in the upper house. In the lower house, at least you've got to show up in your electorate. But in the upper house, you don't have to do any of that. You don't have an electorate. You answer to no one. You just rock up and do your job. So we need to build that centre-right crossbench with common sense people. And that's why we're running in lots and lots of lower house seats, so people can see us there and they'll vote for us in the upper house as well. And then there's a few seats in New South Wales that we reckon we can win in the lower house. And at very least, we'll run second. And yeah, we had a lot of new people join up after Bondi. We had a lot of new candidates stick their hand up. We had a lot of new donations coming in, and people want to fight, and we're the ones that want to do the fighting. So that's what we're looking forward to. We're interviewing candidates now. We're vetting them now. We are building for one hell of an election campaign. We've got a really good team assembled, and hopefully we can have more on board, and we're going to have regional organisers. We're going to have everything. So if you're someone out there in New South Wales listening to this and you want to get involved and you want to help out, get on our website, get on our Facebook page, whatever it may be, get on there, stick your hand up to volunteer, donate some money. We'll link you up with people, with other firearms owners, especially on the back of this, but not only firearms owners, because you have to remember there's other people on the periphery, like spearfishers, just general fishers, that know that that shooters are first and they're next. They have the same greenie types that don't, that think a fish hook in a fish's mouth is just the same as, a brutal death for for some animal that they love, one of their furry dogs. So they're coming for you next. And a lot of those guys are understanding that. And they're people that just like doing what they do for fun and for recreation and for food, and people won't leave them alone. So they know that too. So those guys are getting galvanized as well. That's great. And then speaking of galvanized, it's also very important to say that something that was also another symptom, not a symptom, but another outcome of these new laws is that we had the great myth that we had a gun lobby in Australia. that wasn't the case. After 96, we all formed into clubs, but we truly didn't galvanize, and we all went our own separate ways, and we all differ in, as you know, in the firearms world, people differ on all kinds of things. Just even in the hunting world in general, we are not truly galvanized. There truly is not one gun lobby. But now we're all talking. Now we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Now they're pushing us all together so we can fight for our livelihoods. So we're happy to do that. We're happy to talk to anyone that wants to push the ball down the field. Happy to anyone that wants to help out and donate. And like I said, volunteer, join in, be a candidate, come and talk to us. Because we want to have one hell of a campaign, and we want to stick it to them, and we want to show them. And if the Liberal Party and the National Party don't want to do it, or they don't want to prove themselves as true centre-right parties, and get out of the way, we'll do it. Because that's the only way they'll listen. They only care about their jobs at the end of the day. That's my main message when it comes to politics. It gets down to individual people, individual personalities. Basically, I've heard the analogy before, and it's true. It's Hollywood for ugly people. They all have an inflated sense of self-worth. They all like being seen.
Could that be the title? Could that be the title?
Look, it's not my quote, but it's one that I love. It's one that I love.
I'm thinking that's going to be the title.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Politics.
But it's true.
Hollywood for ugly people.
It is. It is. They all want to be celebrities. They want to be a big name. They all love it, telling you what to do and influencing your life and taking things away from you, because they all have a chip on their shoulder from their childhood.
That's it.
There's almost none of them that don't have that situation.
It's Hollywood for ugly people. Politics. It's Hollywood for ugly people. That's fantastic. Yeah. I got two questions. I almost forgot them, because that was Graham Park's line was owning a firearm is a political act.
Yes.
I like that. So two questions. One is, what can people do who don't live in New South Wales? How can we help?
How can you help? Okay, so you've got South Australia now that is scared. They don't want to move too much on things because they've got their own election coming up, and One Nation's breathing down their neck down there in South Australia. So they're very scared to do anything until after the election, and then they'll claim a mandate. But something that we did during the recall to Parliament, and it's something that's still going on our website, and that is we have an email campaign where you can find your local candidate wherever you live in the country, and you can find your candidate federally or state, it doesn't matter, and you can email them directly. There's a template on there you can use if you want, or you can put your own personal email in there. And they'll respond to you, and you can remember that. And, we see the numbers of people and how many emails they get. We know exactly which politicians get the email. We know exactly how many they get, and the uptick of the email, and the bombardment that they got was very, very good to see. They have to answer your emails. They have to answer your letters. They don't have to take your appointments in face to face, and they generally won't. But they do need to write back to your correspondence. And it's important to have that correspondence because it all goes on the record. Now, many years ago, I heard the same thing. I'll write a letter. Oh, what's that going to do? What's that going to do? But it is important so they know who's out there in their jurisdiction or in their electorate. So getting in contact with your MP and letting them know who you are and where you come from and what your priorities are and what you'd like to see out of them is important, because most firearms owners are out there living our lives. We're raising our families. We're being good Australians. We're keeping to ourselves, and we're not bothering anyone. But then the other side, that's the ones that are always taking from us, like your Greens types and animal justice types. They're the ones that are getting out on dinghies and blockading the coal port in Wollongong. And then they all get arrested and they scream about it saying, oh, we did it. We stopped, we blockaded the coal port in Wollongong. We did it. And it's okay for those people because they can get arrested and then they get back to their lives. Whereas we can't do any of that. So we don't have that luxury. In fact, they told us as soon as they announced they were going back to Parliament with these laws, they said to us, if you have a march, it's going to be unlawful. So not illegal, but unlawful, which means they weren't going to, as they clarify in New South Wales, they weren't going to allow us to get a permit to march. So it was, you're going to have an unlawful, assembly, and we're not going to allocate enough police. So they're going to stitch you up at every angle, like that sort of thing. So you want to march, you want to get angry, you want to talk to people in their face directly. But in a strange way, that's just what they want. They want you to get angry, and they want you to get crazy, and they want you to be separated from each other. Whereas, as I was saying before, getting together in your clubs, being around people that, you can support and that support you, and looking after yourself mentally at the moment is very, very important. So doing things the right way by sending emails, sending letters, and then when it comes to election time, it's getting politically active. That line that you mentioned, that was one that we had very, very similar. We had our 30th anniversary in Kundabung at Old West Guns up there, and we did an episode of our podcast up there, and one of our old organisers, Steve Bowler, said that quote almost verbatim. He said, if you hold a fishing rod, if you own a firearm in New South Wales, it's a political act. And if you don't take interest in politics, politics is taking an interest in you. And I remember I was saying it to you last time, how I figured that out when I was much, much younger, but I had a very unique, melding of the politics and the hunting world. Everyone now needs to get clued in. They need to be having political discussions at their gun club, because the chickens have come home to roost for us, and there's no one that's not affected in New South Wales about this. And once all your elections are over in the other states, you're going to see new firearms laws, and you're going to see overreach. So if you're not politically active, then it's all going to happen to you. Now, I'm obviously biased because I'm from the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, but from the firearms world, we are the only party that will die in a ditch on this stuff. Every other party has policies about immigration or free speech or anything else. They don't specialize in firearms. Does One Nation or the Libertarians or the Liberal Party or the National Party, have they got a firearms spokesperson? Have they got someone where if they say, we believe you should all have the right to bear arms, or we believe everyone has a right to self-defense, or everyone should be able to have as many firearms as they want. Half of them haven't even got a firearms license. And if you ask them a follow-up question about what's their favorite firearm or which caliber would they recommend to shoot foxes with, they probably couldn't answer you. So that's the difference that the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers has, is that we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. So it's important to realize that you do have to be careful with your votes. If firearms is a major issue for you, if you're like me and this all goes away, it's going to crush you. I can't just move on to the next thing. I can't get into model trains. That's not going to fix me. It needs to be firearms. It needs to be hunting. Even if my firearms go enough to take up bow hunting, I'll be crushed. My father said to me many years ago, the fastest way to become a vegetarian is bow hunting. I'm a little bit biased for that as well. Or also, there's another line, but I won't say that. I can't say that on a podcast. But yeah, so you need to get politically minded. If firearms are your thing, it's the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers. Now, states like Queensland, it's much, much harder because you only have one house of politics. But in Tasmania, we did have someone get up in the lower house there. So that's a special... Yeah. So as a special interest party, we got someone elected down there in the lower house, which is generally hard to do. So in Queensland, I believe it is possible. And we did it 3 times here in New South Wales as well. So I believe it is possible. Yeah, basically, the answer is politics. What can you do now? Get involved in politics. Get involved in a club, in a branch. And if, someone wants to get things started with the Shooters, Fishers, Farmers, contact us directly. Contact me directly. You can find me just about everywhere. Just look us up. Get on the party. We have an email on there. Ask us, how can we organize? We're talking to people all over the place saying, how can I... You've sold me. I'm awake, you might say. I'm awake now. I want to get involved. How can I do it? Great. Here's your local branch. Get in touch with them. Start going to the branch meetings. And then as soon as an election or a by-election or anything rolls around, a fundraising campaign, a letter drop, a door knock, whatever it may be, a fundraising barbecue, be there, because now it's live or die. Now it's time to die in a ditch on these things, because the next election is going to be telling. If Minns gets even more power, he's going to say, you know what I did was right. Everything's fine. I got it right. I have a true mandate now, because Bondi was 5 minutes ago, and then now my vote increased. So we've got to make sure that it doesn't. We've got to make sure that they know that this was a mistake that they made, and we are going to truly vote as a bloc this time. So
I think
that's
kind of
is the answer.
that's my next question. My next question is And you and I have spoken about this. Depending on how you look at the stats, there's 1.2 million license owners in Australia.
Yep.
So how do we start connecting to each other? And we spoke to Graham about this in Queensland. It's something like 6.4% of the population up here are license holders. And the thing about license holders is all license holders are over 18. So we're all.
Yeah.
It's not just we're part of the population. We're part of the voting population.
Yeah.
So and as you rightly said, for both good and bad reasons, there's been a significant separation between organisations, clubs, disciplines, and so on and so forth. I've never been particularly involved in the separation. In fact, some of the reasons why I've left positions within organisations is because of that separation. I don't like to think that I'm better than anyone, so I've never really enjoyed that whole kind of whether we're up here and they're down there.
Yep.
And even on the podcast, we've had a couple of guests where that's kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I've pushed back against it. So, but I suppose the question is, or even if it is a question, I suppose, how do we connect better? I think that's it. How do we, you said there is no lobby, and it's probably a good thing that we don't have a lobby in many ways, because people can say that's the gun lobby. But how do we have a community?
Well, look, I know you and I have and this is not directly answering your question, but I think it's relevant, is that we do have generational change. This was our generation's Port Arthur. When I say our generation, as in you would have been a young man, I was a child, and then now we're having a political moment where we didn't grow up and that was the system. Now there's a new system that's being installed. So we're living through that. So that's why I make that analogy. And it's like anything. We wouldn't have what we have now. We wouldn't have the progress that we have now if it wasn't for the generation before us. But, and this is going to sound really disrespectful, me saying this, but it's not what I mean at all. It's that our generation needs to do more, and the older generation needs to let us do more. They have their hands on the reins still in a lot of these organizations. They have their hands on the reins in a lot of these clubs and associations, and the older formats of the way things were. But now we live in a more dynamic society. Like, for example, me, obviously I'm in a semi-public role now. I'm someone that makes no secret of who I am, and I don't care. My last name is Borsak, for goodness sake. So I've seen it all and heard it all, written, said, shown about my family members. So I don't care what anyone else thinks anymore. Saying things about a gun lobby, I would love to say, yes, we have a gun lobby, and there it is. I don't think that's something that could be ashamed or possibly bring you any shame or bring anything you could be scared of, because we know it's a paper tiger. We know it's not a real scary thing. We know it's a straw man, whatever analogy you want to use for it. We know it's not a bad thing. So I don't believe leaning into that is a bad thing. And I think some of those older generational people want to stay away from politics because they're worried about being vilified. They're worried about the rug getting pulled out from under them. And it's like, no, it's not. It's okay. It's okay, because we're not doing anything wrong. So we have nothing to be worried about. But just, no, we need to stay out of the spotlight because they'll just take it away. And it's like, no, we need to get in the spotlight so we can get the power back. So we can, so then we have our hands on the real reins, which is reins of power. So that's, I'm not singling out anyone in particular, but I keep bumping up against it all the time. And I just want everyone to not get along, but I want us to understand that we're all in the same trench now. Like, we're in the trenches again. 96 was the trenches, and now we're back in the trenches. When our party first formed over 30 odd years ago, there was a whisper from the governments that they were going to come after the guns. And they formed and got together like crazy. New South Wales had 30,000 members of the Shooters Party back then. And that was on a whisper of they were going to come for the guns. And then since then, we've all split up into our own groups. People have alienated themselves. People were dying in a ditch over the whole clubs issue back then. Well, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. This is all bullshit. And then Clubs rose and fell during that process. And then now it's like, no, that is the normal. So the people in the system now are the ones who won that internal battle back then to set up the system that we have. And now we're moving into a space where we need to have a new system. So I don't know what that system is. I'm not saying that there needs to be one, but we definitely all need to be friends. We have, like, it's an old adage, but we have so much more in common than we have,
Yeah,
not
the
in common.
differences.
Yeah, the differences. So us getting together, us talking to each other more, us doing things like sharing campfires, having more conversations like this. This is so important. This is so important because the rest of politics is, now we think the country's divided, but then within our little subsect of the culture or our society, we're divided as well. We don't have the luxury of being divided anymore. I guess that's my thesis statement. We don't have that luxury anymore. So we need to be coming together and whatever it may be, finding political power. And within the firearms world, again, the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, in my opinion, and I know because I've been this for so long, and yes, I'm biased because I work for them, but I work for them for a reason. I'm involved with them for a reason, because there's no one else that when you scratch the surface knows anything about firearms. The rest of them all give you lip service, but then as soon as they don't need you anymore, they'll drop you like a hot potato. So
yeah, look, I agree. The way I looked at it, because I lived through 96 and I lost everything, and I didn't shoot for 10 years.
That's right. You told me that.
And, you know, there was there was a time in your life where you didn't tell anyone that you owned a firearm.
Exactly.
You know, and there's a lot of guys who, you know, you went from, you know, you're a mass murderer to you're a criminal to you're this. You went through the whole range of the bad things you were, and then it kind of got, you know, you're just a redneck, so you're just this, or you're just that, or you just, so, you know, and there was a kind of, I suppose, an agreement that with Port Arthur, you take it on the chin and things would get better. And what we realised is, nope, that was a lie.
Yeah.
Once they took with one hand, then they started taking with both hands. And I'm completely on board with the idea of that. We do need to say, okay, it's, you know, the thing that binds us is the fact that we want to pursue what we're pursuing.
Exactly.
We all do what we want to do. It's all different, you know, but we want to be able to pursue it. And there is a great many people who wish to take it away from us for whatever reason. And it doesn't matter whatever the reason is, because that, you know, they'll take it. So we've got to start thinking about how do we work better together, as, you know, and we don't have to be, and, you know, people say, well, we don't need another association. I'm completely on board with that. We don't need another association. But, and again, Graham and I were thrashing around this. We need something like NATO. We need an Article 5. You need to go, oh, well, if you're going after them, we're in too. That's it. If you're going after them, you're going after us.
Yeah. Look,
you know, we've got to have that. We've got to have that kind of recognition that if they go after you, they're going after us.
Yeah,
it's
look at that. Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. Like, if one of us is attacked, then we're all attacked, and we should keep that mentality rolling. Yeah, and that is what you see in the United States, where they have just everything is a no. If you come after one part of firearms, then we're expecting you to take the lot. So the answer is no, and that's unfortunately something that in Western politics, in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, we don't have conservatives anymore. And that was what I noticed as a boy, that if you don't conserve firearms, then you don't conserve anything, because firearms is the ultimate stopgap against tyranny. Like, it sounds like an adage, but if they let firearms go, then they'll let anything go. And now we have modern conservatives who we're finding out here in Sydney that you know, and last time we spoke, you were saying how that left and right paradigm even is becoming less and less relevant, and it's true. But conservatives now are just basically, all they do is conserve the little parts of the things that the left is taking off them. They just try and conserve of what's being taken away all the time, and things keep shifting. And then we end up in a point where now we're so far left, where the treasurer, who is he has a PhD in political science, another guy who's pure politics, is calling the leader of the National Party far right. And the National Party is not far right. So if that's how far, as they call it, the Overton window has shifted, that the center is now the far right, then we are absolutely stuffed if that's where we are these days. So the best we can do is keep our line in the sand, get together, because don't forget, they're ramming however many 100,000 people. 2 years of this immigration is going to black us out in the ledger nationwide if they have another year the same as what they had last year. They're going to import as many people as there are firearms owners in this entire country right now. And if you're not forming a political bloc based on that, then you're crazy. So don't be fooled by pretenders, I guess, is my message. But yeah, this is getting very, very sad and very and very dark. But I'm not meaning it to be at all. I'm not meaning it to be at all.
Look,
let me think of a few more jokes.
I don't think anyone who's listening or watching would have any criticism for you guys feeling a bit sad and dark at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah.
As I said, the difference between that border is, at the moment, it's the difference between night and day. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And I really, I'm a member of a local hunting club in New South Wales, and I really feel for you guys.
Yeah.
I genuinely think you guys have been the immediate answer for a problem that is too big to be answered in 2 sittings of Parliament.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just quickly talk about some things, some action points that people can take now?
Yes, let's
especially
do that.
in New South. Yeah.
Let's get back on track.
Yeah. So just especially what they can do in New South Wales. So they've come down hard on the firearms limits. So, unfortunately, the buyback's going to happen. We don't know when, but those firearms that you have, those straight pulls, those button presses, they're still legal to operate. It's okay. They haven't been outlawed. The law has passed, but it hasn't been proclaimed, which means the gun limits aren't in place and those sorts of things. So they are going to go. If you want to have your last pig trip and blast a few or whatever, I'm pretty sure that's perfectly fine. But if on your license, if on your license it says category AB and it has hunting recreation as your genuine reason, I'd encourage you to get target on there as well. Because then when this is proclaimed, you'll have 10 on there. You may need to join a target club. But another option that you can take right now, which is, because this is all about insulating yourself. So if you're someone that, again, they haven't thought about this sort of thing, but if they're going to impose these gun limits, for example, me, in my family, from my perspective, there are some firearms that we can get rid of. That this might be something where we can shift a few. Okay. But do I want the famous Borsak elephant gun sent to the crusher? No. I want to hang on to that. For me, that's a piece of family history. So that's a gun that I want to hang on to. So if I need to get more firearms so I can keep that going, I'm going to go for that. So the firearm categories you can have now are hunting, you can have target and sporting, and you can have collecting. Now, the collector's licenses have shot through the roof, the applications. That was part of that Channel 7 story tonight. And some collectors have to have certain firearms have to be inoperable, certain ones don't. So as it stands right now, if the laws were in place and there were no new regulations, you would be in a situation where you'd effectively have some firearms on your collector's license, if you have that as a genuine reason as well, and you're in a collector's club, and you had the limit of unlimited on your collector's license, but then you had 10 on your target license, for example. If you also had hunting, you would not get 4 more. You would get 10 total. Now, we don't even know at this stage if that's 10 per household or 10 per license holder, but let's assume it's 10 per license holder. Then you could have someone else in your household with 10 as well. So then you could move your firearms in between your collector's license by, and switching other ones out. That's a scenario that if things were as they were right now, that would be possible. And if you also can't join a target club because it's not affordable and you only have hunting on there, something you can do to insulate yourself from this situation as it is right now is you can, and my hunting club's in the process of doing this, is making your hunting club a target club. So that would mean make it a target club and or a collector's club. So then you don't need to join multiple clubs. You just need to have that one club, and that can be your catch-all. That can be the one stop for you to meet your requirements and allow you to have that certain amount of firearms or that collector's license as well. Now, there's additional things you need to do as a club to meet those, to satisfy those categories, which is easy to do. You can affiliate with the range. You can affiliate with the SSAA in New South Wales has most of the ranges here. And then you can do your target shoots. But if that's the hoops you have to jump through now, so you can have 10 firearms, I'm more than happy to do that now. The world's changed. I used to think because it didn't matter with gun caps in the past that I didn't need target shooting. But now I'm going to do that. I'm going to jump through all those hoops to make sure that I can do all those things. And that's something that again, they didn't expect that because they didn't consult, but we would have told them on day one that was going to happen if they asked us. So if your club wants to insulate themselves, I encourage you to have those discussions with your club about mending your constitution to allow target and collecting, and go through the process. Because again, there's no reason why your club can't be a target club. There's no reason why your club can't be a collector's club as well. It just doesn't have to be a pure hunting club. But the reason they've attacked hunters with the limit, obviously, is because of Bondi. Those guys were in a hunting club. So they've said, let's attack those. So insulate yourselves as best you can. See if that works. That is a practical step you can take. It takes a long time in New South Wales. So a lot of clubs are making those moves now. There are certain hoops you have to jump through in the legislation. Obviously, it depends if you're an incorporation or those sorts of things. But make sure you follow the letter of the legislation, follow the letter of your constitution, and put it to your club if they want to do that. Now, what we don't want to see is obviously clubs breaking up over this. We want to see more clubs. And the worst thing in the world, because I come from the hunting community, is if some of those hunting clubs see this as their only way to have their members have more firearms. And with inflation, again, set for 7 to 8% inflation this year, and people can't afford keeping up all their memberships. If the hunting clubs don't budge and everyone just joins target clubs, then the hunting clubs will fall away. That would break my heart. And if that's over people saying, oh no, I don't want to do that because this hunting club's always been that way and we're never going to make that change, I think that's just crazy. I think that's an old way of thinking. It's now irrelevant. We're in a new world. We're in the post-Bondi world. Everything that was set up before doesn't matter. The way you can insulate yourself, that's all that matters now, here and now. So that was kind of what I was talking about with the intergenerational stuff. If some of those clubs dig their heels in, you may be seeing the end of your club. You may be seeing the end of everything that you've built, and your own ego doesn't matter. Keeping the culture alive is what matters. So please have those conversations. Think about it. Have a think about it. If that's something that you're prepared to do, if that's something that your club would like to do to retain its members, to grow its members or anything like that, then do that. Now, in New South Wales, the R license is going to be no longer a genuine reason. So I encourage people to join a club as well. Do it now. Get around other hunters so you're not on your own. Pick a club that works for you. Meet some like-minded people. Have some people around you that are willing to support you and help you. Most clubs have a club armourer as well, which is somewhere where you can store firearms, somewhere where you can move firearms around in between people without having to go through gun shops and things like that. So that's another function of the clubs that's very important. What else can you do?
Firstly, I think we should. That's some really good, good advice. But more importantly, I think what it was, and I think we should reinforce that things have changed, and unfortunately, you're not going to be able to claw back those changes, at least in the immediate term. So you need to flex with those changes. Exactly. And so think about, okay, so they've put more restrictions on. So so what do I need to do to still do what I want to do in this new environment? And I think that's fantastic advice. So think about it, what is the difference between target and hunting? Okay, how do I fit into that? Collecting's another great option, great opportunity. And I went through the process myself. I kind of said, if I've got to limit this down, what am I going to do? And that's not a good. I completely understand that that'd be a very, very difficult situation to make. So if this is a way around that, even if it costs you sacrificing one rifle to fund the changes, it's worth, it's worth keeping.
Definitely. And there's something in all of this that I'm really happy about, and that is how people pivoted straight away and said, well, you know what? Just to insulate ourselves, we're going to get more license holders. That's great. Just to insulate myself. And that was with no prompting. Even though in the media there were lies saying that people were out there telling people to do this, No one was telling them to do that. I'm not telling anyone to do that. I'm saying consider that as an option that may work for you. I'm not telling you that you need to do that. If you don't want to, you don't have to do anything you don't want to. I have no influence on any of those sorts of things. But if you're someone that doesn't understand the way the table is set, then how can you operate? How can you move forward? So you need to read everything that's on the table, how it is right now, and these are my options. There's no one line anyone should go down. Everyone should choose the one that works for them the best. Every club, every association should choose the one that works for them the best. And that's all that we're saying. No one was out there telling anyone publicly from any organization, from any political party, go and buy more guns, go and get more licenses, go and do this, go and do that. That's all lies. That's all lies. If someone tells you that's what was going on, tell them that was a lie. Because no one was doing that. Because our guys were smart enough, our guys and our girls and our olders and the youngs, they were all doing it at the same time, thinking, how can I jump through these hoops? And they started jumping through them individually for themselves. Now, in New South Wales here, for people that don't know, our New South Wales registry, so for example, when you go to Tasmania, their registry is in Hobart. It's very easy. It's very accessible, very easy. You just go in there at whatever the police building is, you know where it is, you can see it, you know who the person in charge is, they're a visible person. You know, you can contact them, you can walk in, you can hand in paperwork, you can ask questions. It's a functional public service. Here in New South Wales, we used to have one that had a physical address. And then they moved it all the way up to the Northern Rivers, up in Murwillumbah. And then they built a new one in a secret location up there. So we don't have a shop front up there. We have nothing. We don't know where it is. They won't tell us publicly where it is. It might be for safety issues, but that's completely irrelevant because, like I said, I used to work in community corrections and I dealt with all the worst people you can imagine: rapists, murderers, guns for hire, bikies, child sex offenders, everyone. And I saw them every single day of the week. And who's more dangerous than them? So the safety argument is absolutely irrelevant. The police, with law-abiding people, need to mitigate risk, not avoid risk. By them avoiding things like that and sending all the way up there in the bush, out of nowhere, so it's physically hard to get to, unfortunately, the staff that you're going to get are people who live out there in the sticks. The police that they send out there are in God's waiting room. You know, they're not the best people. And then surprise, surprise, but it's just true. Where are you going to take an assignment? If they can't get doctors in the bush, you think they're going to get cops to go out to the bush? Come on. So if that's the way they run things up there with those kinds of people, who knows how the hell this guy got through the loophole or got the approval? Who knows? They're never going to tell us again because they just close ranks. They're not transparent at all. Those people up there with that going on in that viable scenario of what that place is, no wonder that happened. They need to get it back to Sydney. They need to get it back in a visible position where people know where it is and staffed with competent people, because that's why Bondi happened. It was good old-fashioned human incompetence. And that's, yeah, I'm drifting, but that's an important message.
We're on some good stuff.
Yeah.
Again. So we got to anger it again. So let's finish on something positive. Come on, man, we can do it.
All right. I don't know. The rut's coming up. This is going to be a bittersweet one. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to New Zealand in a couple of weeks to do a bit of goose hunting over there. In New Zealand,
very nice.
Yeah, the feather shooting over there is absolutely insane because they have so many, obviously. But some of the best hunting in the world, and they've got a horrendous problem with Canadian geese and our black swans. So they want plenty of them shot, and I'm more than happy to do it. So I haven't picked up a shotgun in a while, but something interesting about over there is just we weren't taking any guns, but just the process of getting our international firearms license approved was horrendous. Took months, whereas you used to wander into Christchurch Airport with your gun back in the day, and you'd go over to the tiny little office there in the airport, and a copper would eventually show up, and you'd hand him $10. He'd write you some firearms, some temporary licenses, and you'd tell him a yarn about where you're going, and then you'd be on your way. And now it's a whole process.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I think my rut plans are cancelled because we're busy training ourselves for this election that's coming up. So I've got some political training to go on and get clued up. So I think prior to the election, I'm happy to sacrifice a rut based on that, which sounds crazy. It's like missing grand final season, but I'm pretty laser focused on this next election mainly. So yeah.
Well, The red deer are still in velvet up here. I went and had a look at them on Tuesday.
Yeah. Here's a good story. Let's end on this. Here's a good story. So many, many years ago, my parents, because my father, look, this is not private information, but my father's got quite an extensive trophy room at his house, and he's got some very, very big animals in there. He's hunted the world over many years, obviously. And my mum decided when I was in high school that she wanted to make a bit of money on the side with commercials and things like that. So they would come to our house and film the odd commercial, and they'd borrow a bit of taxidermy every now and then. Yeah, and borrow heads and film in the house and stuff. And there was a famous ad many years ago. Might be too esoteric. But there was an old Difflam commercial, which is a throat lolly. It's like Strepsils. And the commercial was in a trophy room. There was a moose on the wall, and he was saying he had a sore throat, and they gave him a Difflam. And then the moose was like, "Oh, great." And then he was like, "My legs, I can't feel my legs," because he's on the wall, right? That was the gag. So that was my dad's moose. And that was in his trophy room many years ago. And then, just a few days ago, someone left a note on his front doorstep who remembered that he had all this taxidermy and said that he wanted to rent a red deer from him. He's got quite a cracking red deer. The red deer he shot with Clark McGee back in, to be 93, 94. Back then, when Queensland Reds were it in Australia, it was like, I don't know, 10 in the record book or something. Like it was pretty up there. It was pretty up there. Of course, now it's a dwarf compared to what gets dragged out of the bush all over the country now. But back then it was massive. And I had a red deer up there, and then I took one of mine into my house. Dad said to me, "Oh, I got this note on the doorstep from this guy who wants to hire a red deer for a commercial. Why don't you just give him your one, because I can't be bothered getting up on the ladder to get mine." And I'm like, all right. So I spoke to the guy. He says, "I want to rent this for this and this." I'm like, "Oh yeah, cool." I said, "What's it for?" And he said, it's for a Tui's new commercial.
Oh yeah.
And this is a red deer that I shot in Queensland when I was a boy back in 98. So I'm like, "Oh yeah, all right, sure." And I sent him some photos. He goes, "It's perfect. It's perfect." My taxidermy shoulder mount red deer is going to be a Tui's new deer. So that's pretty cool.
That is very
cool. I hope the commercial gets made or it gets
we'll
published.
have to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah. Look, it's not a cracker, but those guys didn't know what they were looking at, so they were happy. He wanted a 10-pointer. I got a 10-pointer. Easy. Done.
Well, I got an 11 I'm looking up, which came out of my blocks last year. I'd like to do better. He's 5'6", so.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Made some decent double sixes getting around here in New South Wales that you'd be absolutely stoked with. But I know the Queensland herd is the important herd. I know it's a historic herd.
Well, these guys, nearly all of mine that came off the block, they're all broken in one way or now. They blew up there hard. They've always got a broken tine or something. So he's got a broken tine and actually a broken beam.
Yeah.
And on the break side is where he threw the 5. On the healthy side, he threw the 6.
Was that during the drought by any chance?
No, that's just that was the opposite.
Okay.
That was last year. It was pouring down rain.
Because a fallow block that I was on a few years ago, I noticed them in the years directly after the drought or at the end of the drought. A lot of the fallow deer were only having one antler, or they were losing antlers because the feed was so poor. He
kept the beam, but it's snapped. It's got a significant break, but he kept it, because they fight. They're all every deer I've pulled off there. There's a break somewhere. They just blew up there a lot.
Yeah,
they're scrappers.
Yeah, right.
It's an angry block.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it West Queensland or something? Is it right out there?
It's angry block, mate. Look, again, thanks very much for the information.
No worries.
I knew it was going to be a little bit dark, but
yeah,
there's not much you can do about that. But I think some of the advice you've given about pushing forward and more importantly, getting political. We've got to, it's the post-Bondi world, and that means we've got to get political.
Yeah. And just do things in the right way. Like there's a lot of angry people online now. You hear them. They're individually attacking politicians. You as a firearms owner, that's just what they want. And they're going to take everything from you for doing that. So just be smarter than that. Be so much smarter, because now they're going to go through all your social media now because they are going to have an uptick in their intelligence when they do their background checks and everything for licenses. And if they're seeing that you're all over someone or you're in a comment section going nuts, at someone individually, or, you know, making strange comments about politicians individually, they're just going to take your license off you. They're going to take all your guns off you. So be smart about it. We need to get them at the ballot box, not in the comment section, you know?
What a great way to end.
Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Mark.
Thank you for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
All the best.
Rightio, that's a wrap from the team at the Hunters Campfire. We hope you had a laugh, learned something useful, or at least were a little bit entertained. And you feel a little bit more pumped up for your next hunting, shooting, or outdoor misadventure. As always, a massive thanks for the support from our friends at SSAA and Beretta Australia. Whether you're out there chasing game, telling lies to your mates around the fire, or just trying to remember where you left your boots. Stay wild, stay curious, and for the love of all things blaze, stay safe, so we can see you back around the fire next time.